For more on the Havana International Fair, we're joined by Paul Johnson. He is the president of Chicago Foods International and also a member of the advocacy group, U.S. Agricultural Coalition for Cuba. So let me start with this. Why are you there at the fair?
Well, I've been participating for the last 8 years here, so come back to see what we can do this time around. I tell you, it's been busier than in years past. So I'm here now to wear two hats. One, to support U.S. agriculture in general, and so we can sell more agricultural foods, and then my own company to continue to sell export products here to Cuba.
You talk to your buddies there who obviously represent other companies as well, like yourself. What are you hoping to achieve by the end of the fair? Are there particular goals, or is it sort of like a meet and greet networking thing?
Well, I think it's more than just a meet and greet. I think, right now people do need to understand, the regulatory framework that we're working in. There are limitations that prohibit us from exporting more than what we want. This is really an opportunity to understand Cuba, its market, their needs, and find ways that we can collaborate with Cuba to build on that so we can make the contacts going forward to hopefully trade more in the future.
And it could potentially go both ways as well, because I'm sure there are companies in Cuba that are looking towards the U.S. as well. And I'm thinking particularly some of the stuff that's already being exported now, food being only a part of that, but medicine, for example. Is there the infrastructure in terms of transportation in place to meet the future demand, assuming that's going to be there?
I think there's a lot of infrastructural needs that are going to have to take place to support that. I think step one is to really build that internal infrastructure internally to help feed the rising tourism market, and then of course Cubans' national consumption. And then from there talk about exporting foods to Cuba, which is something that we're big proponents of. We believe that in order to have normalized relations, we're going to have two-way trade. So I'm also here to look to see products that Cuba are exporting, and there's a few interesting products that I think would do quite well in the U.S. market.
You think about this relationship, so much has changed just in the past 12 to 18 months. If you were to talk directly to the White House as to what you would like to have done either faster or differently, what would that be?
Well, I think we're going at a good pace. I understand that there's a need after a half a century of no communication or miscommunication. There's a real need to get to know one another. And I think that's taking place, and I think this fair is an example of that. You see a lot more companies than you did last year. Obviously, as a businessman, I'd like to see that pace quickened. One thing that we would need to do is understand that we need to compete. There's countries that have been doing business with Cuba for 50 years, and the United States is going to have to understand that we're going to have to use everything at our advantage, logistically, culturally, familial, geographical ties that bind the two countries to really compete. And one way we can do that, another way, is to offer credit, which is something that we're currently limited to do. So it prohibits me from exporting more goods to Cuba because other countries are able to offer it and I can't. So I guess if there was one message, that would be it, to level the playing field, to allow U.S. companies to compete with other countries that are doing business here.
You mentioned earlier that there are some products in Cuba that you think could potentially do well in the United States. Any specific ones?
Well, besides the usual ones, we always hear about tobacco and rum, which is always interesting, but aquaculture comes to mind. It's a country that does very well in that industry, and I think the United States is keen on importing more shrimp and lobster and other products from Cuba. So that's particularly one that I'm interested in. Herbal medicine could be another one as well.
All right, very good stuff. Paul Johnson, I want to thank you for your time. I'm sure it's very interesting times there in Havana. So much is changing so fast. Thank you very much. We will see you next time.